blame the other party when something goes wrong, but not look at our own party. And today I say shame on our own party.
The Republican Party has already been down this road with Donald Trump, and they look the other way.
He doesn't have a Nazi tattoo.
On those issues, I mean, there are some similarities there, wouldn't you say?
I would say similarities to the rape, no, but I would say, sure, I agree. I hear you. No,
I did not use that word when it came to Donald Trump, except to say that there are allegations of sexual abuse against him.
Sure.
And he was found liable.
Yes, I would say
in the E. Jean Carroll case.
I think a big
guys. Trump and his MAGA base have once again plotted to destroy the elections for Graham Plattner. They're doing everything to make Democrats drop him. Last night on Abby Phillip's show, MAGA pundits were going after Plattner like wild animals, but they were fact-checked so hard by progressive panelists, they were cornered into complete silence. Now, I'm going to play some clips from the debate. I'll give my opinion as we go.
Shocking allegations. A woman who says she dated Maine's Democratic Senate nominee, Graham Plattner, tells CNN that he raped her for nearly 5 years ago. Jenny Rassicott says that she's been seeing Plattner on and off for 2 years, but one evening in 2021, Plattner entered her home drunk without permission, and after she explicitly told him not to. She says he forcibly had sex with her. Plattner denies those allegations. Now, I want to warn you that her story includes strong language and details of an alleged sexual assault, which may be deeply disturbing.
So he had kind of jumped on top of me and indicated that he had intentions that were sexual in nature. And I remember just at first being like, hey, I'm not into this. I'm not in the mood. Don't, whatever. And it got to the point where I was like, okay, I feel like I've said this enough times. He's not listening to me or he's not hearing me. And I looked at him and I remember this very specific look in his eyes. And I could smell alcohol and I was like, this is different. I remember specifically him grabbing at my chest and I hit his hand and I said, don't touch me. And I remember that during the altercation specifically.
And then he kept going.
Yeah, and it was this weird mix of coming in and out of, I don't think consciousness is the word, but coming to and kind of falling back into that drunken, I don't know what I'm doing state. And yeah, and he would apologize in those moments and then go back to doing what he was doing.
Rassicott says that she felt her safest option was to comply, and that Plattner knew what he was doing was wrong.
Is there any way that he thought this was consensual or no? Just because...
I don't believe that you can think that that scenario was consensual. You have to understand that wasn't when somebody is repeatedly, when somebody in the middle of it says, don't touch me, that's obviously not consensual.
The allegation was first reported by Politico, and minutes afterward, Plattner posted a video in response online.
Any accusation of non-consensual behavior is categorically false, regardless of the inaccuracy of the reporting, but mindful of the political reality it will inflict. We are taking the time to reflect on the best path forward for the state that I love, the people that I love, the movement I belong to, and the goal of defeating Susan Collins. 154,058 Mainers, the most in primary history, voted to reject a broken politics beholden to Washington and the donor class. They voted for hope, for change. Throughout it all, you never turned your back on me, and I will not turn my back on you now. Every one of you deserves to see that vision come to fruition and see Susan Collins defeated.
Plattner now has until July 13th to decide whether or not he's going to drop out of this race. If he chooses to do that, Democrats will have until July 27th to find a replacement for him. Yemisi, you were on here not that long ago talking about this story and going against actually what seemed to be a lot of your party, many of whom were saying he's changed, give him a chance, we don't believe the other women who made allegations about him. What now?
Well, this is not surprising because it has always been a question of his character. And for me, the line was the tote and cough last year. For his campaign, that wasn't enough. We had the Reddit comments, we had the Kik profile. it was building and building and building. And what we saw was a pattern of him not being honest about his actions to the very people that, for a campaign, are supposed to protect you. You give them all of the information because then they work on your behalf. And that alone was an alarm that this is somebody who cannot be trusted. And he looked elected officials in the face and he let them add their name to his character. And he said, nothing else is coming. And I think what we know now is more was always on the way.
What she's talking about is this Wall Street Journal article that reported on a meeting that he had with Senate Democrats. And in that meeting, Bernie Sanders asked him if there were additional allegations that would come out. Plattner says there weren't any. Elizabeth Warren asked him, she said there's a difference between marital issues and sexual assault. And Plattner agreed and denied any credible allegations of assault were forthcoming.
Who in their right mind would believe him in any answer he would give other than to say, yes, there's more that's going to come out? You're a guy with a Nazi tattoo who has this horrible report coming out in the New York Times. There have been rumors about this for a very long time, and they're there giving him the benefit of the doubt. That just seemed really odd to me. You could not find anyone better in Maine to run up against Susan Collins. You can find any other progressive who would have been able to take on that messaging at all. Like, I just cannot believe that.
That is a very good question.
Position for
that is a very good question. I mean, there is an issue here with a lot of very prominent Democrats, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, two among them,
my kind of man,
who basically turned the other way at the first set of allegations. Why does it take a sexual assault allegation for them
to that point, I heard Senator Kirsten Gillibrand speak at the Aspen Institute last week. And when Graham Plattner came up, all she had to say was that he was a strong candidate and was going to, soar to a victory. There was no even an acknowledgement of the New York Times report of the Nazi tattoo. And if you all will remember, this is the same senator who was called the Me Too senator, in part because she led the charge against Al Franken in the Senate. She very much, was instrumental in pushing that culture forward. And I think Me Too was necessary in a lot of ways. But we didn't need a rape allegation to know that Graham Plattner had already allegedly violated the standards that she set. And she was willing to sacrifice all her principles among many other Democrats to go up against arguably the most moderate Republican in the Senate, Susan Collins, who's already willing to go up against Trump. This is not some super partisan person.
Sochi?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, shame on the part of the Democratic Party who stood by him. I think that the Democratic Party was very much split in this race. There are some people that were speaking out against a Nazi tattoo, I said it as well. There were a lot of other people. I think there were a lot of women after the last allegations that weren't willing to go out and defend him, but there were a lot of men in the party. I understand that Gillibrand was one of them because she is the head of the DSCC, but shame on our party to do that. And our party has to recognize, if you want to be the party of values, if you want to be the party of decency, of principle, then you do have to come out and call unequivocally for this man to resign, and that is happening now. I think that what this is a larger problem with both parties, which is how far will you go to hold on to power? And when there are allegations of sexual assault, of rape, of any sexual misconduct, it is incumbent on leaders of both parties to speak out and say that person should not serve. Did I see it with Donald Trump? No, I still have not seen it. I don't think you have said that he should not be our president or serve, or that he shouldn't have been elected. But the leader of the Republican Party right now has 28 sexual misconduct allegations against him, and he pardoned people on January 6th. And his party still stands by him as like he is king. And so there is a bigger problem with our politics if we are going to turn the other way, to hold on to power and blame the other party when something goes wrong, but not look at our own party. And today I say shame on our own party.
We're only a couple of hours into this, and it's already being turned into a litmus test.
Guys, I wish people had pushed in on Trump and the Epstein class as hard as they're going against Plattner, who hasn't even gotten elected into a position of power yet. I mean, Republicans don't care. They don't care that their leader was best friends with the leader of one of the largest sex trafficking rings in the country. They don't care that their leader was named 38,000 times in the Epstein documents. They don't care that their leader has more sexual assault allegations on him than any other politician in the world. It's so sickening that they just ignore every crime of their leader like it's nothing. And yet, they have the audacity to lecture other people on morality. At this point, guys, Republicans are hoping that the Democrats will self-select Plattner out with their own purity test. The Republicans are scared shitless of Plattner, and it shows.
In the Democratic Party, Congressman Richie Torres had a tweet earlier. He said, "I have no endorsement to rescind. Graham Plattner should drop out." That is a message, obviously, to Plattner, but it's also a message to Ro Khanna and to Ruben Gallego, who stood with Graham Plattner through all the allegations, through the Nazi tattoo, and both of them are aspiring to national office. They are thinking about running for president of the United States, and they hitched their wagon to Graham Plattner, and now it is blowing up in their face. They're going to have problems on the campaign trail, hypothetically, if they choose to run. But speaking as a Republican here, it's actually a good day for Democrats, assuming Graham Plattner gets out of the race, because they have the opportunity now to choose another candidate. And I don't know the ins and outs of Maine politics, so I turn to people who follow these things a lot more closely. Chuck Todd, who we all know, put a tweet out today that said, "You only need generic Democrat in Maine." Graham Plattner obviously had a lot of skeletons in his closet, and a quote-unquote generic Democrat, someone who doesn't have those skeletons, could potentially defeat Susan Collins without the baggage. We'll see.
We're in a tight spot. And I think for both parties moving forward, there should also be the question of how do you market to the working class and what are your expectations of them? I think one of the biggest pitfalls that the Plattner campaign had is that they believed that somebody that lacked morals and values would relate to the working class as a whole.
Authenticity.
And I'm going to tell you, as the daughter of two working class immigrants, that's not the way it is. They are some of the most prideful people, cheating. They're just things that we thought that they would excuse, and they clearly haven't.
You know what's interesting? I mean, you bringing that up. The other day, and you may have been here when we were talking about this, Vice President Vance actually made a very similar point where he basically said, well, whenever, the president crosses the line and says something that's rude or off color or whatever, it's just the tone police going after the working class, essentially was what he said. There is this kind of part of our political movement on the left and the right that is doing exactly what Yemisi is suggesting, which is basically saying anything that is uncouth or bad or immoral, that's just the working class, when it's really not.
Yeah, although, to be clear, this one was not uncouth. But your point, I think, is valid. I think there's an underlying issue right now, at least with the base of the Democratic Party or the progressive socialist wing, where if you go on X right now, they're still backing Graham Plattner. I mean, Stephen King just a few hours ago saying, I hope he doesn't drop out of this race. And I think you have people who are so blindly connected to this far left ideology. And you can make the argument of the far right as well, that you're willing to just give up on having those kinds of morals. But I do think that they are very recalcitrant on the left right now. And that is part of the larger issue that the Democrats in power right now, the so-called mainstream Democrats, are going to have to deal with. Because while this specific issue is very obviously different than someone who says, I'm going to wipe my hand on the American flag, or I want to get rid of all police and prisons.
But what about
that's
what
a base that's not going to be okay.
That the Republican Party has already been down this road with Donald Trump, and they look the other way.
He doesn't have a Nazi tattoo. That's a big piece.
But that's true. Listen, that's true. But on the allegations of sexual abuse, even on the kind of comments that, like the Access Hollywood tape, on those issues, I mean, there are some similarities there, wouldn't you say?
I would say similarities to the rape, no, but I would say, sure, I agree. I hear you. No,
I did not use that word when it came to Donald Trump, except to say that there are allegations of sexual abuse against him.
Sure.
And he was found liable.
Yes, I would say
in the E. Jean Carroll case.
I think a big piece of the difference here is just the context that went into this. Everyone was saying, don't go with Graham Plattner. Every single person said, this is going to happen, and people
a lot of people said, don't go with Donald Trump.
And yet Donald Trump was able to win, and he didn't get a bunch of Republicans.
Whether or not he wins is irrelevant.
Well, exactly. That's the problem, is that your party stood by him.
Right.
That the Republican Party stood by Donald Trump regardless of what the allegations said. And not only that, If you were in
Do you
DC,
believe
hold
the
on,
allegations? That's the difference.
Do I believe I believe women.
Trump versus Plattner.
Yes, I believe women. I believe women.
But my point is, I don't think a lot of the allegations made against Trump were believed by the base or by the general voters. I think part of the issue was because
I think
he was
that's also true. This is the problem, though. That was also true of Plattner. The allegations were against him, and he was still high in the poll. So whether you are believed by the base, is that really the standard for how we are going to adjudicate whether people should be holding
office? Morality does not live and die based on voters make dumb decisions all the time. That's not the arbiter of morality. And I mean, you said you believe women. I'm not a believe all women person. I think everyone deserves due process. Everyone deserves their time to, state their case. So, I mean, I still think that's fair in this case, but I think we had plenty of information to know going before this Politico report that he was likely unfit for office. I mean,
the last victim who came forward was dragged because she happened to be a conservative.
Yes, and I think that so yes, you're right about that. And it's been interesting to see some of those people who dragged this woman who was in the Lindsay Fiffield, who was in the New York Times story. They called it uncorroborated claims. Another person basically said that she was essentially a plant of the Republican Party. And now those people have changed their tune. But I also think, is there an apology that needs to be had here?
Yes.
And some soul searching that needs to be had here? Is it enough to just say, well, this woman, I didn't believe the last one. And Lindsay Fiffield pointed out to Ruben Gallego, mine weren't sufficiently troubling or serious for you. After that first allegation, it is fair to ask, what's up with people who have to look at the partisan identification next to your name before they decide whether or not they're going to listen to you?
The believability of someone's, serious allegation should not live and die based on if they've worked for a right-wing think tank.
Well, but I mean, I think there's, to your point, that it should not be based off of a few core people in the Republican Party or the Democratic Party because it is not convenient to them. Therefore, they do not believe the allegations. And that is what has happened in the Republican Party. That is what happened in the Democratic Party. It was not convenient to certain folks in the Democratic Party to believe the allegations. So then, therefore, there were smears against the woman. Same with the Republican Party. I will say, you brought up the Nazi tattoo. You know what's interesting about this weekend in Washington, D.C. is there are white supremacists marching in Washington, D.C.
Republicans didn't back them.
There was actually someone from the administration. No, they did not. The administration did not speak out. No, they did not speak out against
Republicans spoke out against this immediately, and Doug Burgum on this.
And the Trump administration did not. And so this is what I'm saying. It's one rule for Democrats and another one for Republicans. While I think that the American people are going to see the way and the stances that each party takes moving forward.
This is a great pitch for political homelessness.
We got to leave it there. Next for us.
Guys, one thing is 100% clear at this point. If Plattner drops out, Maine is lost, and Collins will win. The alternative to Plattner is more Republican control, so that is not the better option. The harsh reality is that if Plattner were the Republican, Republicans would still back him and still fight to win. Collins has been in power for so long for a reason, and people think a Dem alternative would stand a chance are fooling themselves. Plattner dropping out is handing Collins the win, which would be worse for everyone. And guys, I don't know whether to believe these allegations or not yet, but the timing on this is just a little too perfect not to raise any eyebrows. I will say this, though. I'm disappointed to see Plattner at the forefront of another scandal, but I'm not so naive as to not wonder why this allegation is coming now and not any time before. Every time a Democrat gets some traction, Republican publications track down women who claim he assaulted them and force the Democrats to replace him. Anyone remember Gary Hart? Seriously, this game has been played for decades. How about Al Franken, the smartest guy in Congress, forced to resign because of the pranks he made when he was a comedian? Trump literally was convicted of sexual assault, and the judge says he is clearly a rapist and he got elected. All right, guys, that's it for today. I'll see you tomorrow with another video.